All right, man, peace. So, brothers, in this edition or this installment of the quote-unquote Black Man Protect Your Seed series, we'll be featuring Mr. Tyreek Hill, the outstanding wide receiver of the Kansas City Chiefs, maybe the soon-to-be former outstanding wide receiver of the Kansas City Chiefs, because he is embroiled in a quote-unquote child abuse scandal involving his young son, who appeared with a broken arm, or at least his mother is claiming that Tyreek Hill broke the arm of his young son. We don't quite know what has happened, but according to reports, she states that their son told her that his daddy did it when she asked what happened to his arm. Now, there are a lot of strange things that occur in this life, brothers. We know that there are a lot of females out here who are bugged out of their minds. She could have done it and claimed that the child told her that he did it. Who the hell knows? I'm not going to try to castigate her or cast any aspersions on her. Well, the purpose of this video, once again, is to make sure that we understand that, and I say this all the time, if brothers are not ready to have a child, don't have one. Especially if you're not quite sure what you should be looking for in a woman, or you know that you're not mature enough to act as a father over that child, because a father is a steward. That's a 24-hour-a-day, 365-day-a-year job. And at the end of the day, if you know that you're not mature enough, do not allow anyone to pressure you into taking on that job, that vocation, because that's the most serious job that we're going to have our entire lives, man. And I say this repeatedly. In this society, in my view, the so-called black man should not even be thinking about having a child until he's at least 35 years old, at the very least, because at least at that point, you know in what direction your life is heading in. Things in this realm are so capricious, they're so whimsical, they're so haphazardly. You don't know where your life is heading at 22, 23 years old, and that's the age at which so many of these cats are having children. And that's also the age where you're going to make your most mistakes. So therefore, that's the age where you can be the most easily manipulated, especially by many of these modern day liberal females. So am I saying that Tyreek Hill is the person who did it or didn't do it? I don't know. I wasn't there. But at the end of the day, what I see from him is a severe lack of maturity. I don't know what type of environment he was raised in. Who the hell knows? I know that he's an outstanding football player. And sometimes football players, they're almost like soldiers in the military. They turn on that aggression and they're not quite sure how to turn it off. So anyway, they're going to talk about it and I'm going to chime in.
Welcome back to the West Club at Nissan Stadium here in Nashville, Tennessee. One day after a district attorney in Kansas declined to file charges against Chiefs receiver Tyreek Hill and his fiancée in a child abuse investigation, Hill is heard discussing...
Let the record show that that chick is his quote-unquote fiancée.
striking his 3-year-old son in an audio recording obtained by Kansas City television station KCTV. In the wake of the tape surfacing, the Chiefs have announced after the first round of the draft that they have barred Hill from all team activities.
In other words, we have to utilize this gesture of quote-unquote good faith with the community at large, because this is going to give us more than enough time to ascertain exactly what Tyreek Hill's role was in the injury that his son suffered, especially since we're only in May right now. So this is just a gesture of good faith by the Kansas City Chiefs. But they damn sure are not going to cut Tyreek Hill unless they absolutely have to, especially after they just cut their running back last season. The running back who got involved with busting that female's ass out there in that hotel in Cleveland.
Listen to this.
Why does he say daddy did it? Why? Why does he say daddy did it?
I don't know. He says daddy does a lot of things.
Like what? A 3-year-old's not gonna lie about what happened to his arm. He is terrified of you, and you say that he respects you, but it's not respect. It's terrified. He is terrified of you.
You need to be terrified of me too.
Now, brother, you see that shit? The chick told Tyreek Hill that his son is terrified of him, and he said that's not terrified, that's not fear, that's respect. A lot of times we conflate the two, those two concepts of fear and respect, because sometimes in the communities that we come from, those two words or those two ideas mean the exact same. If I'm able to instill fear in another person, in my mind, depending on how I've been programmed, I believe that that's respect. And that's the real reason why so many of our people, just to take it to another level, that's the reason why so many of our people have a hard time respecting one another. Because sometimes we associate respect with intimidation. And that's Tyreek Hill's world. I'm not even going to say that maybe he learned that by growing up in a bad environment. Maybe he learned that on the football field. When you're able to instill fear in your opponent, that equates to respect. But on top of that, he clearly has a very toxic rapport with his so-called fiance. And there's a lot that she's willing to put up with right now, probably because she knows that she's quote unquote dating a professional athlete. But after a few years, she is going to leave him. And it would not surprise me if Tyreek Hill decides to proceed with the engagement, that we hear about another type of so-called domestic violence or another dispute between the two of them where he might end up putting his hands on her as well. It's very clear to me that this brother needs some type of help in whatever form or fashion it may come to him. And once again, who knows? It could be a football issue that he has, of violence on the football field. It could be what he endured growing up as a child. That's why I make these videos, so-called Black Man Protect Your Seed. Because say, for example, if Tyreek Hill grew up in an environment with no father where he was being abused and he saw football as an outlet, how is he going to know how to constructively raise his child if all he's felt his whole life was violence and instilling respect through fear or fear-based programming? This is a form of mind control, that fear equals respect. And that's not really the case, because what happens after a while, once the person tries to combat their fear, they're going to lash out in a violent way at the person who's always trying to instill fear in them. And you know, sometimes cats do this a lot. They try to quote unquote use certain roughhousing tactics on their son to make them rough and tough. And to a degree, I get it when they're around 7 or 8 years old. But at 2 or 3 years old, there's no need to be roughhousing with your son, punching him in the arm, punching him in the chest, and all that silly shit. That's not a sign of manhood. The main thing that we have to toughen up is our minds, man. The body's much easier to toughen up than the mind.
Literally kept saying, "Daddy punches me," which you do when he starts crying. What do? You make him open up his arms and you punch him in the chest.
It's very obvious that this chick is trying to set him up, his quote unquote fiance. And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. Maybe he needs to have some cold water thrown in his face so that he can stand back and reevaluate certain things. Once again, brothers, do not rush into things with these women, man. Do not rush into things with them. The woman is like the moon. She's different every night. She changes all the time like the winds. So it's up to a lot of cats to learn about themselves before you engage in a serious relationship with a woman.
And then if he gets in trouble, you get the belt out.
That's a portion of an 11-minute recording believed to be recorded by Tyreek Hill's fiancée. Stephen A., how do you think the NFL should respond to this?
I think they're already responding. I think the Kansas City Chiefs are already responding. You have to suspend him and you have to keep him off the field indefinitely. We don't know all the details, but here's the reality of the situation. I'm a dad, you're a dad. If someone said to me, "You're taking my 3-year-old child's arm, telling him to put his arm out, and you're punching him in the chest," I'm going to say, that's a damn lie. What is that? There is absolutely no truth to that whatsoever.
Yeah, those are football tactics. That sounds like a drill that he learned in high school football, trying to toughen his body up. People just punching him in the chest, and he's trying to utilize those tactics on his son.
I didn't hear that on that tape. I didn't hear anything that came close to denials. And that's the problem. A matter of fact, he said, "You should be scared of me too." And then called to the B word. And so it's not a good look.
Right, but what does that say about her, that she'll be in a relationship with somebody who's trying to pump fear into her heart? Maybe that's something that she's attracted to. Not trying to cast aspersions or cast blame on either party. Once again, that's what you call a toxic relationship, when both people involved are as concerned with maintaining their rapport because they're getting a fix off of the negativity. That's why I make videos on the quote-unquote breakup makeup cycle. That's not healthy.
It's reprehensible. And then for me personally, it resonates from this perspective. This is a guy that went to school at West Alabama. He's 25 years old. He busted his tail to get to this point. And the things that these dudes do to blow opportunities that they work their entire life for shows how senseless they are.
Well, Steve, a lot of it's because of their lack of training, the lack of instruction that they've received as a child. That's why I say it's cyclical. If you know in your heart that you cannot tell the difference between a wife material woman and a concubine material woman, she should not be someone that you're going to engage, or no woman should be someone that you should engage in a real relationship with until you can make that distinction. If you know in your heart that you have nothing to teach your son or your daughter, then you should not have children. because there's a lot to instructing rather than just sending them to school, because the school system is Saturnian. They're going to learn about a certain version of history. Nowadays, they're going to be taught about sexual fluidity and homosexuality and transgenderism and how all those things are okay. So you have to be able to counterbalance that with your teachings in the home. That's if you even decide to send your child to one of these schools. But Tyreek Hill is a product of his environment, and he can't do anything other than what he was taught. So that's where the real problem lies in. Yes, he seems to be an incompetent father, but was his father competent?
And I want to make sure that I'm very, very clear about this, because if you've heard me, Max, you've heard me well. I'm one of those people who believes that the narrative against black fathers, I find it highly offensive how black fathers get stigmatized in this nation. Well,
there's a reason for that, Stephen A. Smith. All fathers, for the most part, are now being stigmatized in this society, but the so-called black male as a father has always been stigmatized. And the reason for that is that during the quote-unquote crack epidemic, that took a lot of so-called black men out of the home because either they were drug-addled or they were selling the drug in most of these lower-income communities all across America. After that, the so-called black women started to become subsidized by the government and also started to be inundated with propaganda about how women were smarter and stronger than men. So a lot of the issues that are still prevalent in the so-called black community are an after effect of the quote-unquote crack epidemic. So we can't just look at the media and the Caucasian and other demographics when we talk about why they have so many bad thoughts about the so-called black man as a father. You also have to look at the liberal black woman. But number one, we have to look at ourselves. Because if you're not choosing the right woman to inseminate, everything after that is going to go haywire.
Most black men that I know who are fathers are phenomenal fathers to their children.
Or try to be, or alleged to be.
They provide, they protect, they put their lives on the line, they scratch, they claw, they do everything they can to uplift themselves and their family. In this rat race of a world that we're living in, where clearly we're behind the 8 ball,
and behind enemy lines, don't forget that.
Coming from a disenfranchised community, I resent the fact that people out there believe these things about black fathers. But
once again, Stephen A. Smith, when they say those things about so-called black men, what they're really saying is that the so-called black man does not have a culture. That's what they're saying.
But then I see examples like this, and it bothers me even more that those individuals, knowing that stigma exists out there about people from our community, will go out there and engage in this kind of nonsensical and reprehensible behavior.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, dare I say that if Tyreek Hill actually was someone who was cognizant of how other people would perceive him as a so-called black father, that he probably would not have done that. So I think that that's an assumption on your part that he's knowledgeable about how so-called black fathers are perceived. It's also a presumption on your part that he actually is the one who broke his child's arm. I mean, if I had to put money on it, I would say that it was him, but we don't know that for a fact. That's really what I'm saying. And that's also why I stated that you never know. Some of these females are so crazy that with the opportunity of potentially sabotaging Tyreek Hill's career, especially if she might know that the money that she's going to get from him has already been cemented, that she might consider setting him up. All I'm saying is that we should wait until everything has been brought forth.
What possible justification can you have for hitting a 3-year-old child, punching him in the arm and punching him in the chest? And again, I don't know if he did it or not. The DA says I didn't have enough to prosecute, but it's clear to us that a crime was committed. But you hear the tape, and he seems more preoccupied with checking her than making sure to deny the accusations that she is putting out there on tape about him.
Maybe because he's so accustomed to her making inflammatory statements that have no truth in them. But that, once again, would be just as much a reflection on him as it is on her, because not only is he still with her, but he had a child with her, and she is his quote-unquote fiance.
So because of that reality, your butt don't need to be practicing with this team. And oh, by the way, my last point. Tyreek Hill is a bad brother. 215 receiving yards against New England in that game in November when they lost 54-51. I'm sorry, not against New England, against the Rams. All right, even though in the playoffs they only had 1 reception, 42 yards. This brother is something special. Kareem Hunt got himself in trouble. I believe it cost him a Super Bowl. And Tyreek Hill getting himself in this particular situation right now, I don't know if he's going to be back. It depends on what they find.
He'll be back. I don't think that they're going to be able to find or prove enough to stop him from playing with the Kansas City Chiefs.
And if he's not allowed to come back, it's going to cost Kansas City again. And it's sad because it ain't football that cost the Kansas City Chiefs a legitimate shot at the title. It's reprehensible, inexcusable behavior on the part of two young black men who bust their tail to get here and blows it with nonsense like this.
The reason I like that point in particular is because even if you say the way I came up or the way I see the world, I don't agree with the kind of changing perceptions of how to raise children, right? There's a growing consensus, I think, if it hasn't already arrived. You don't hit kids. It doesn't teach them the right thing. You certainly, for a 3-year-old, don't leave a mark on their arm where they have to explain where they got it from or tell them to put their hands down and...
Well, there's a difference between disciplining a child and full-on physical abuse or child abuse or child violence, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, there's no doubt that whatever Tyreek Hill has been accused of, if it's true, and it includes putting his hand on his child to the point where the child has a broken arm, he clearly has issues.
Punch him in the chest.
He has almost as many issues as that drawn-on hairline on Stephen A. Smith's head. Look at this shit. Stuff is drawn on. Like, come on, Steve. Just accept the fact that it's gone.
In the chest. To be clear, Max, it was a broken arm. Right. Exactly.
See, I didn't even know that.
Yeah. No,
I didn't even know the arm was broke. So a 3-year-old kid
with a broken arm, right. So that should be obvious by now. But even if you are so immature that you don't understand that, then your point, Stephen A., that there are consequences to that behavior. Even if you're a knucklehead and you think that's okay, it's not okay. Everyone else is telling you it's not okay, and there will be dire consequences. You break a 3-year-old's arm, and if the rest of it's true, even if only that part is true, obviously.
Well, you know what I hope, though, Max Kellerman? I hope that if the rest of it is not true, as well as the initial components of the quote-unquote story are not true, that you guys do something that you never do, which is have a segment on First Take where you apologize to Tyreek Hill for raking his name through the mud. Because you have not done that with so many of the other prominent NFL players who were accused of violence and who have been found innocent, i.e. Reuben Foster.
Obviously, he can't play football for a while. But the reason that the NFL's somewhat measured response, I believe, is appropriate is because I didn't hear him admit to anything on that tape. It sounded like she was trying to get him to admit to something.
Absolutely, she's trying to set him up.
And he didn't. To your point, he also didn't deny, and you would think under normal circumstances, someone accused that, like, are you crazy? You think I broke my kid's arm?
Exactly. That should be your immediate response, is what I'm saying.
However, there.
Well, he did deny it in a roundabout way. When she said that the child told her that he got his arm hurt by daddy, she said, why would he say that about you? He said, I don't know. He says a lot of things. That, in my view, was a denial.
There will now be legal, there is a process to this, and because he didn't admit it on the tape, the NFL is okay to say for now he can't be on the field.
Any human being alive, someone accuses you of breaking your 3-year-old child's arm, the discussion stops.
Right.
What?
You don't know, but for example,
Never.
For example, you don't know how many conversations they've had like that where in the...
Exactly. That's why I'm saying maybe Tyreek Hill is accustomed to her trying to set him up, which once again is as much of a reflection on him as it would be on her. But a lot of these dudes, they like these crazy chicks. They like this up and down, just like a lot of chicks like crazy dudes. So maybe it's just another case of two negatives coming together to try to make a positive. Two negative people coming together.
Where in the past he may have said, no, I didn't, and this time he didn't. That's what I mean. Let me address all of these things really quickly here. There's 3 different hats, I believe, to wear in this discussion. One is, as you pointed out, that of a father, or rather, even that just as a human being. This is absolutely, as you said, reprehensible, and as you said, is...
Then why does everyone on the panel have such a hard time pronouncing the word reprehensible? What the hell is going on here?
As well.
What's in those mugs? I don't think it's water.
Well, Tyreek Hill with his past has not earned the benefit of the doubt. There have been incidences, including involving this exact child in the past. As an attorney, I can tell you this, Max, you bring up a point which I believe will play out in the legal process and probably already has. There's nothing directly that is an admission that could be used here against Tyreek Hill in a legal case. But then there's the third hat, and that's the NFL. And the NFL doesn't have to abide by the same rules that the justice system does. The NFL plays a game where Roger Goodell's decision is final. And I have belief this decision will be harsh.
Listen, not to bring it up because he hasn't done anything since he was involved in the incident with his kid, but when Adrian Peterson got in trouble because of the corporal punishment issue, you have to remember he was widely considered to be the best running back in football, and the Minnesota Vikings had to get him up out of there. Why? Because corporate sponsors, advertisers wanted nothing to do with their brand because it was going to compromise their bottom line because of the heat that it was brought upon him.
Well, Adrian Peterson, the MK athlete, he was being put through a certain ritual with that whole situation, unfortunately for him.
What I'm saying is, at the end of the day, you're going to have a whole bunch of people because there's nothing more innocent than a child.
Here's the issue.
You can't have that.
The issue is child abuse. And the reason it's so serious, and you're right, well, the league doesn't have to hold itself to a legal standard, is that children cannot defend themselves. So they have parents who are not only supposed to defend them, but to teach them. And the fact to protect them.
Well, that's part of the problem. I'm not quite sure if Tyreek Hill has anything to teach his son. Maybe he doesn't. I'm sure that sounds pretty harsh, but at the end of the day, a lot of people are having children and they have no idea why.
And the fact, and even if you are a parent who subscribes to some kind of physical consequences for the kid, the rest of the world is here to tell you that you're wrong. You're simply wrong.
Well, that's according to you, Max Kellerman. There are a lot of people who do believe in laying hands on their children. I think that there's a big difference between someone slapping you on your backside as opposed to someone breaking your damn arm. I also believe that whatever the new methodologies are for raising children, and of course you always start the interaction with some type of intelligent discussion or an attempt at a intelligent discussion with the child. But sometimes certain people believe that a good slap on the backside gets the job done better than
All right, we'll leave it here. We'll wait to see what the NFL's decision is on this. And as for us, we move on. Russell.
But anyway, brothers, that's basically it on that. Hopefully Tyreek Hill is able to get the help that he needs. And even more importantly, hopefully his son will be able to get the help that he needs. But that is why I always state that the so-called black man must protect his seed. And that starts from before the child is born. If we wait until after the child is born and we start going about trying to develop processes on how to raise the child, especially with all of this nonsense and these distractions going on out here and this false propaganda about what people should adhere to, what they should believe in and what they should follow. We have to have a game plan for any child that comes into the world, whether it be a little boy or a little girl. And I don't believe that Tyreek Hill had any type of game plan. I don't think that he's had a game plan on how to live his own life, much less how to raise his child. Hopefully I'm wrong about that. And he is going through a period of maturation. He's only 25 years old. But there are so many traps and stumbling blocks out here for the so-called black man. If you don't have someone who's going to tell you what's going on, you are going to get entrapped. You're going to get caught up in some dumb shit. But anyway, peace.